Everyone following along, you see how I get really like dialed into things intensely and then have to step back. This is one of those moments where I'm stepping back going, yeah, there's still something in here in Genesis I'm not quite figuring out. And I'm not quite sure what it is. The first part's the creation, no problem. First sin, no problem. Cain and Abel development, no problem. It's after that things start looking a little bit strange. When Noah's called and the monomyth picks up, it's normal, except for that. Except that there's an addition in there as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, first of all, I've isolated that the first creation story and the first story where the flood story, where the part is about bringing 7 pairs of clean animals and then a pair of unclean animals, 7 pairs of all of that right there. That section, which sounds different than the other flood part, that and the first creation story fit together. Those, as far as I'm concerned, I look at them, you can take those out and it's a cohesive story without those in there. There are additions in those for the spiritual search that provides information that was necessary, but they weren't a part of the original creation story. They were not. The creation story was shorter and simpler, and I think that, honestly, I want to go back and do the Enuma Elish again. I got to leave Genesis alone, and I want to go back to this and go through this again, because I know Genesis is framed on this. The Enuma Elish is where I cut my teeth on realizing what they're doing in the psyche. That was the first place I realized that as they're creating people along the way, that those are iterations of us. This is where I realized all of it is playing out in the psyche, even the big stories. And I started interpreting it, and I'm sure I could go back and look at it and go, okay, I got a better handle on this. And I think then to return back to it, to Genesis, would be good. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. I just haven't focused on this, but I started looking at, there's a site called Esoterica, Dr. Justin Sledge. And I look at his stuff a lot. If you're into mythical, esoteric stuff like that, yeah, check him out. So I had messaged him and asked him what would be a good book. I know that I know that Eve is not the first wife. There's a Lilith. There's something else that precedes all of that. So anyway, he recommended this book to me, The Hebrew Goddess, Jewish Esoteric Teachings, the Kabbalah. All of that stuff was really deep and heavy before Genesis came about. Genesis emerged from a greater big thing going on. So there's parts that are going to show up in that story that it still has roots previous to Genesis. And I think we're going to have to just let those go right now and grab the big pieces. But Genesis is bigger. It comes from a larger body of work. It has to be dialed down a little bit differently. I believe that if I take out those pieces in the story and perhaps one of the lineage things, that it would very closely replicate the 7 tablets of the Enuma Elish. I think. And that the reason those other parts were put in then is the creation, the additional creation story tells us how we came about, how the mind came about, how we're naked in the garden, how cycles happen, things like that were not in the first creation story. It's telling us how the universe works. And then in the flood story, it's telling us other things as well. It's not just telling us the 7, which matches that up there. It's also telling us things like 40 days. That first shows up right there. These are going to be analogs that are going to be used later. The numbers are going to be used to designate something else. 40 days, 40 nights is going to become a number that means till the time of enlightenment, or till the time you're finished with this, not enlightenment, but this trip, this issue, whatever it is. Enlightenment kind of assumes that everything is cleared out. This trip is going back again and again and again. You don't just say, I let go of everything and it's gone. You usually have to go forgive this, forgive that. Oh, here's a memory I've got. This is going to be a repetitive sort of a thing. At any rate, I think that lineage, people coming off and, the numbers that are in there and living, was alive for this much and then died after this, all that weird stuff in there. I think that right there doesn't fit on the template. That doesn't fit on the human template that I can see, unless it's just creating more and more and more. I think what that might be doing is creating story tie points, network story tie points. Like this, if you were to go look at that old Jason and the Argonauts movie, there's a point where Hercules doesn't go on the adventure, where they don't go through the clashing rocks. He gets left behind on an island behind. That's a tie point. Right there, he doesn't go on the adventure goes along, but later on the Greeks come along and, okay, here's Hercules off at this point. He didn't go on that adventure, so we're going to start him off on another adventure. Things like that'll happen. There's the island there, there's a point where the women had taken their father, the king, and sent him adrift. That's never addressed again. Well, that's weird. Why would you do that? That's a tie point that somebody can come along later and say, okay, this story happened here and the king was set adrift. You can begin networking stories. You take that king right there and he somehow, either him or an offspring or somehow becomes a chosen one and the monomyth begins again. That is the network that I'm beginning to see emerging in all of religion, mythology. Our entire stories from antiquity are built on that one monomyth network. The outer shells are the only thing that's different. Anyway, what I want to do, I want to go back and go through the Enuma Elish again and get that thing dialed in a lot better. I want to understand what that is in a much better way. And then I'm going to come back and get Genesis again. So that's where I am with it. I also want to say this so far. As you go through Genesis right now, there's a creation. We start out, we're born. At first, we're not aware. This is God taking care of, or the higher being is learning. It is deciding what everything is. That's us learning. And then it gives us dominion. That's us saying, okay, now I am old enough to make processing decisions to decide what starts going into my mind. And it's going into my subconscious, the seas, it's my conscious, the physical things I do, or the air, my mind, my thoughts, all of those things. It is the trilogy. It's mental. It's being carried in an older style. Another thing, once you're kicked out of the Garden of Eden, is it blocked off? Why is there a sword and a cherubim, a flaming sword, and to guard the way so you can't return? The reason is because we don't return to Eden, do we? I'll use terms like that, but more as I see what's going on is that we start out in Eden, but we never go back to Eden. We go to someplace different. In this particular material here, we're looking for the Holy Land. And there's a difference between the two. When you're a kid, you're not attached to everything, but you're not even aware of it. When you're older, you need to be not attached to things. However, now you're aware of it. They're different places. Eden, bliss in ignorance. Promised Land, bliss in awareness. There were two trees there. There was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you're not supposed to eat. Then there's the other tree. What is that whole story? The duality starts right there. You got a choice. Go bad, go good. If you disobey God, you're on the path. And, for anybody that hasn't been following my work, disobeying God does not mean disobeying God. That means starting to accumulate hurtful life experiences. Anything that prevents you from being in that happy state. That doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It might mean that something bad happened to you. However, you are now holding it. That's it. You are. If, however, you're the person that goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. Life is great. I'm in my holy land. You didn't disobey God. You metaphorically did not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You ate of the tree of life. This means you came from a place where you were told, hey, everybody's fine. Yeah, we're all good. We're not going to create enemies. We're not going to abuse. We're not going to do all of those things. We're healthy. We're okay. We come from a good place and our children come from a good place. Yeah, you don't need to take the path. You're still on creation, but what did you do? You ate of the tree of life. Wonderful. We're trying to catch up to you. Okay, so then that happens. First sin happens. That means we begin to have life. We are no longer the happy kid. We begin to experience things. One thing leads to another. It gets more and more. We go off into the world and learn things. We get jobs. We get married. We have issues that arise. We don't have things figured out, and stuff is continuing to actually get worse and worse as it goes along. It is going forth and multiplying. That's not always a good thing. Everything goes forth and multiplies. That's not always a good thing. Everything goes forth and multiplies. We need to interrupt the stuff that isn't good, the good stuff that's happening. So that happens. Cain and Abel, that's our early self, the old, taking over. We procreate. That's all that life going on. And at some point, the world has become too raucous. This is our world. This is us going, oh my God, what do I do? I see that it's me. I'm going to turn inward. Boom, you just became the called person. You are now going to turn inward. The ark is you, your vessel. You're the vessel. You're going to gather the things up with God and go on this purging journey. That is what the Enuma Elish basically does. Except on the other side of it, it also then emerges into now creating new things, creating the Babylon, the new city, the new self, the successful thing. You've gotten rid of the non-success and anger and fear and replaced it with happiness and joy and something different to look forward to is the story that's going on here. And that is each of our life. Now, step outside of that. Look at a newborn baby. That is day one of creation right there, right as you're born. And then as they're young and they're growing and developing, their minds are being planted by life experience. Once they get old enough to start going, okay, I see what's going on. I can grab that. I can move. I got mobility. I'm starting to figure things out. Now we have dominion over that. We are deciding what the quality of our life experience is. Then once that happens, that's when the sin happens. All of that, it continues on that way. But when we're looking at, I got off track right there for a second. What you're looking at children, when you watch a baby, they're going through this. This is their life. A baby, when they're playing in the playground and laughing and they haven't been hit, molested, told how stupid they are and ugly and whatever, when they don't know those things yet, they don't care what color you are, they're disconnected. That is naked, unashamed, and in the Garden of Eden right there. We're witnessing somebody in the Garden of Eden. That's their mind state right there. When you leave that is when the hurt starts happening. Yeah. You see how this stuff works. They're built on this template. Genesis is no different. The package is, which is okay. Till you get far enough downstream and that same package is being used to justify hurting other people, then that's a bad package. That ark's got to go. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to jump back to the Enuma Elish. Just totally radical, but I'm looking at this going, God, there's something added in there. This is simple. That became more complicated. I'm not seeing everything that's there, and I need to step back and reapproach it. So anyway, that's this video. How fun, huh? All right. Love one another. I'll see you when I come back with the Enuma Elish.